It's the most wonderful time of year again. It's time to break out the jack-o'-lanterns, add fresh bones to your bone pile, and select your favorite seasonal brew. This year's selection is Blue Moon Harvest Wheat. Brewers Select. This year we're digging back into the PS1 era with a personal favorite of mine, MediEvil. Just in time for its PS4 remake. God, I'm old. You play as Sir Daniel Fortescue, a failed hero who gets a chance at redemption after having been the first person to die in the battle against the evil wizard Zarok. The game's opening cinematic shows that Zarok has returned 100 years later, and having reanimated all of the dead for his army, he has inadvertently reanimated Sir Dan as well. Thus, the adventure begins. MediEvil was released in October of 1998. The game was originally titled Dead Man Dan, and was conceived as an arcade-style shooting game using Ghosts and Goblins as well as Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas as inspiration, which later evolved into more of a Legend of Zelda-style game, and then eventually morphed into its current version. So, it basically sounds as if someone came up with a cool name for a game and then couldn't settle on what the game should actually be until the character designs informed the direction of the game through multiple iterations. The great irony of this being that they didn't even wind up going with that title for the final version anyway. MediEvil takes place in the fictional land of Galamir, which is so damn goth it may as well be called Halloween McGothicsville. I mean, look at the layout of this place. If you like yourself some hacking and slashing, then this game is for you. Most of the enemies you will face in the game are reanimated corpses, so it's not really a gory game. You do get some satisfyingly squishy noises when you strike a corpse, though. There's even a teensy bit of puzzle solving thrown in. The gameplay is fairly straightforward. As Sir Dan, you can walk, run, jump, attack, and defend. With melee weapons, you can hold down the attack button for a charged attack. This is particularly satisfying to use on a group of enemies. The shoulder buttons allow you to turn the camera. This is handy as sometimes you can see enemies before they see you. So you run around hacking up baddies, collecting mystical runes to open doors into other areas, and eventually after a few areas you will encounter a boss. Most boss battles are pretty straightforward. You find the obvious weakness and exploit it. But some bosses are a little less obvious than others. And sometimes you've got multiple enemies to contend with at the same time, so you may actually need a slight bit of strategy. But ultimately, you can probably just smash everything with a big-ass hammer. The music, written by Paul Arnold and Andrew Barnabas, is a mesh of gothic themes with some lighter, more whimsical elements. The musical duo was instructed to create something in the vein of Danny Elfman's film scores for Tim Burton. And while you won't be hearing the likes of Dead Man's Party, it's a dead man's party. Who could ask for more? What's there is enjoyable enough. Along the way to defeating Zarok, you will have to deal with these lippy gargoyles.
A hero of Galamir who fell at the first charge. Back from the battle so soon? It must think it is a hero by now.
They give you information and keep the story rolling along, but they have little regard for Sir Dan. Much like Rodney Dangerfield, he gets no respect. When you first start out, you will find a sword and a shield, but as you progress through the game, you will receive other, more powerful weapons like the crossbow and the hammer, and even more bigger swords. You will also get upgraded shields, but I never remember to use them. They're just there to look pretty. Throughout the game, you can collect these little jars that will allow you to refill your health whenever you suffer a mortal mishap. There is usually a spring to be found in your current area that you can refill your health with. The springs are limited though, so fill up as needed. Once you've filled your life bar, whatever's left in the spring can fill your jars. As you vanquish enemies, a golden chalice is filled with their essence. Once the chalice is filled, you can collect it. This often requires you to backtrack to an earlier part of the level, but it's worth it. After you have completed a level and collected the chalice, you will be transported to the Hall of Heroes. Here, you will meet with the heroes of Galamir's history. If a statue is glowing, you can approach it and it will speak to you and offer you a gift. Sometimes the gift is health or money, but usually you will get a new weapon. You can choose to skip the chalices, but if you want the best ending, you will need to collect all 20. This is a perfect game for the Halloween season, what with its gothic horror aspect and all, but the game also has a lot of humor. For example, you can choose to select your own arm as a weapon. He just pulls it off and either bashes enemies with it or just throws it at them. Also, since Sir Dan is missing his lower jaw, his speech is somewhat unintelligible. There are 20 unique levels in the game with various locations. I want to take a moment to talk about this one level in particular though, the Enchanted Forest. Now, you can just play through the level like normal, but if you have collected the Witch Talisman, you can summon one of 2 witches in the game. She offers to give you a reward if you collect amber from an ant colony for her. If you decide to take her up on the proposal, she will shrink you down to the size of an ant, and you will be dropped into the ant colony. While you're here battling ants, you'll encounter a door that, once smashed, releases a fairy. The fairy tells you that there are other fairies imprisoned that you must rescue. He gives you fireflies to light your way in the dark caverns below. Everybody keeping up with this so far? A witch shrinks down a reanimated skeleton to go inside an ant colony to collect amber for her, and then along the way he finds fairies to give him fireflies? Okay, just checking. Anyway, now you've got a submission to your submission. But it's all worth it for that sweet, sweet reward. Chicken drumsticks. And it's actually one of the most powerful weapons in the game. You can turn some of your enemies into meat to replenish your health. So you got your standard graveyard levels, of course, but the game mixes it up with an enchanted zombie town, a pumpkin gorge, an insane asylum, your standard demon-infested haunted castle, and even a skeleton pirate airship. I love that sentence. My only real gripe about the game is the camera. It can make things difficult. Now, the game originally featured a character called Morton. Morton is an earthworm that lives in Sir Dan's skull. He appears in the game briefly, poking out of Sir Dan's empty eye socket during a cinematic where Sir Dan is running away from the Jabberwocky. This itself is a holdover from an idea for a level that never made it into the game. Morton also appears in an unused cinematic here, showing that he originally had a much larger role to play. Who knows, maybe he'll show up in the remake. MediEvil is about as graphically beautiful as a game on the original PlayStation gets, in my opinion. They managed to do a lot with a muted color palette that leans on autumnal tones with the occasional burst of vivid primary colors. Plus, you know, it's got a lot of cool skeletons and shit. Okay, so there's one thing about the story that bugs me, and I guess I never gave it much thought back in the day, but it really sticks out to me now. If Sir Dan didn't defeat Zarek, yet Zarek was defeated during the initial battle, who did? We know that Zarek didn't die, he just retreated. So what's the story with his defeat? Look, I know this may seem nitpicky, but it kind of seems like they just glossed over this like they did a whole Seinfeldian yada 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 thing here.
Yada yada yada, I never heard from him again.
Maybe I'm looking too much into it. Maybe we are meant to assume it was possibly one or more of the heroes from the Hall of Heroes. Anyway. MediEvil is another great addition to the PS1 library. It's fun and funny, and you can finish it within a week. I feel like the only reason it isn't more well known is because it was a PlayStation exclusive. But with the HD remaster coming out for the PS4, I think it will definitely become more appreciated in time. So get your OG copies while they're still cheap. Oh, also, it's worth a mention that the game received a sequel, MediEvil 2 in 2000, and a PSP remake titled MediEvil Resurrection in 2005, the latter being a somewhat different game than the original with new story elements and levels. Oh, and there's also a prequel comic coming out, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And that's MediEvil for the PS1. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, thanks for watching, have a happy Halloween, and see you next time.